What's going on, everyone? So Scream 7 is supposed to be heavily focused on Gale Weathers and Sidney Prescott. And based on rumors that have gone around, again, as always, take the rumors with a grain of salt. But based on the rumors that are going around, the opening scene is going to have Ghostface essentially take somebody out that's going to be personal or connect personally to Sidney Prescott. And is supposed to kind of set the tone and the standard and kind of explain why Sidney kind of gets sucked back into the world of Ghostface, right? Because you think, and it's like, the last time Ghostface actually was after Sidney, like specifically going after Sidney, was Scream 3, right? Scream 4, Sidney Prescott basically went to Ghostface, right? Like, Jill wasn't trying to track down Sidney to go get her. No, Sidney showed up. Like, Jill was surprised that Sidney showed up. Right? The Ghostface attacks and everything started happening before Sidney, and it just lined up perfectly, right? So there's that element. Scream 5 obviously was centered around Sam, and Sidney only got involved because of Dewey's death, and then Scream 6, Sidney wasn't even involved in it. So again, there's got to be a reason why Sidney would be linked to Ghostface, why she would come out and take on Ghostface. Now, obviously, Ghostface could go to her, but why wouldn't that have happened earlier? Right? Like, why after 25 years, essentially, would Ghostface now all of a sudden come after her? Right? And to me, I think you could have an explanation that is actually pretty simple. Kind of fits what, Scream 3 and all this stuff was. And that's that Sidney isn't going by Sidney Prescott. That Sidney is going by, the guise of something else, right? And, some people look at it and go, well, Dewey called her Sid in Scream 5. Yes, but he did the same thing in Scream 3 when she was going under the name Laura, right? So she was Laura in Scream 3, but Dewey, when he was calling her and leaving voicemail and stuff, Sid, come on, Sidney, we need you, like, answer the phone, right? So again, Dewey, that was Sidney's guy, right? Like, not like in the romantic sense, but like that was her confidant. That was her surrogate big brother. That was her, like, heartbeat in a lot of ways, right? And that's why I was so disappointed also in Scream 5 and the lack of just reaction we got from Sidney Prescott, because like Dewey was the one thing in her life that she always could count on and had. And I understand in Scream 5, they revealed that they hadn't talked or hung out in a long time, but Dewey cared for her so much and loved her so much that he reached out for her and would have done anything. Like, he would have ran to her if he had to, right? So again, you need to have this clear establishment. And I threw out the idea of a Kirby, right? Kirby being an FBI agent, she would likely know Sidney's real identity, right? And could have a connection. And maybe the opening scene involves Kirby, not Kirby dying, but involves Kirby to a point where, information on Sidney gets revealed. And then thus, Ghostface is able to track her down. But in the process of making that video, which go check out that video after this one, of course, in the process of making that video, I also thought of the Dewey element. Now, obviously, Dewey died in Scream 5, right? But Gale Weathers is supposed to, again, be in this film. She's supposed to be a big focus and a big part. And you got to imagine that Gale would have all of Dewey's stuff and all of Dewey's information. So what if the way that Ghostface gets to Sidney is inadvertently because of Dewey and the information that Dewey has on Sidney Prescott, right? Because, again, Dewey would likely know who Sidney is and whatnot, right? Like, also, Dewey still had, even in Scream 3, had Sidney's name as Sidney on his phone, right? That was, like, one of the big things. Like, who else used your phone, right? Like, so I think you could have this kind of tie-in and connection to where Gale and Dewey are kind of indirectly involved in Ghostface coming after Sidney and her family. Because, again, Ghostface, maybe, Gale gets attacked in the opening scene. There's a casualty, a death, whatever. That causes Gale to flee. And because she knows, like, hey, maybe she has sensitive information on Sidney and knows her real identity and everything, maybe that's why Gale ends up going to Sidney, right? Because, again, Gale's in New York, Sidney's in Seattle. Why is Gale and Sidney, how do they team up? And the film is supposed to take place in Seattle, which is where Sidney is. So to me, it kind of makes sense that if you were to have something where, Dewey had, the details on Sidney, because, again, Sidney would give Dewey that information and give Dewey that insight that, it kind of in return caused Ghostface to attack Gale. Gale escapes. Ghostface gets Sidney information. Gale goes and runs to Sidney because, again, needs to tell Sidney, like, hey, like, Ghostface is coming type thing. She goes and puts her family into hiding, and then in doing so ends up going, and her and Gale end up teaming up to take on Ghostface. And I think you just have this easy, kind of fluid, coherent story, like, that explains everything. It explains Gale and Sidney teaming up together. It explains why they're involved together. It explains why Ghostface finally is coming after Sidney, right? Like, and then obviously there will be the motive. Like, I'm not saying that that's the motive, but how do they find Sidney? Because, again, like, from what we saw in Scream 5, Sidney's just out in the open, just chilling, living her best life, right? Like, she's out there getting jogs in on the pier or whatever that was, right? Like, so Sidney is just kind of out there. Is she really going to do that as Sidney Prescott, especially now that she has a family and a life and a husband, all stuff? Also, Mark Kincaid was a detective. You don't think he could help Sidney kind of get a new identity and whatnot just to protect her children? Right? Like, it's just, and then now you have the team up for Gale and Sidney, because, again, this is supposed to be a very Gale and Sidney focused Scream movie, right? So, okay, fine. Well, how does Gale and Sidney end up getting involved together? Now, you could have, like, I've thrown out other ideas, like where, maybe Gale, as she's recovering, right? Because, remember, she was brutally attacked in Scream 6. And this is supposed to take a little bit of a time jump, right? So you got to figure, let's say a year, maybe 2, right? Gale, as brutally as she was attacked, you got to imagine is going to have to, she's going to take a while to recover. It's not going to be good to go back on her feet in a month, right? So it would kind of make sense. Well, she doesn't have Dewey. The guy that she was seeing or dating or whatever, like, he's dead, right? Like, does she really want to stay in that place that's been compromised and Ghostface is found and she doesn't know, like, what if there's another accomplice out there? I mean, look at, like, Roman, right? Like, so does she kind of go with Sidney and just go, like, hey, I'm going to stay with you? Like, that could be an easy kind of built-in way to explain Sidney and Gale teaming up. But I also think, like, again, Dewey would have, and if anyone would have information on Sidney, it's Dewey. And Dewey dying, who's going to get all of Dewey's stuff? Right? It's probably Gale. More likely than not, it's probably Gale. Right? So now Gale is the one that gets all the information, has all the stuff, and maybe she's read it over and knows, or maybe she has it on the table or something like that, whatever. Right? Again, there's a lot of easy ways to kind of make that make sense. And then now Ghostface comes in, she's able to get out and escape, because maybe this time she has like an escape plan, an escape route, right? So she's not just like kind of sitting there about to get tore up again, right? And then she's got to like let Sidney, is she just going to let Sidney be out in the open, just leave her hanging? Like, not my problem. Like, no, she's going to tell Sidney, like, hey, like, heads up, Ghostface is coming. And then boom, there you go. Now you have them all tied in. Just trying to make sense of like the rumors. Obviously, again, we're going off of just rumors that are being put out and information that's put out, and trying to make, an educated kind of breakdown on what and how this could potentially play out. Obviously, I don't know. It's just kind of thoughts and exploring fun little possibilities and ways, and just being creative and just fun conversation, right? Because I'm very excited for the upcoming Scream 7. But there are some blanks you got to kind of fill in, right? There is some information that you got to kind of figure out. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you love this idea? Do you hate this idea? Do you have like maybe expand more on this idea? Where, hey, maybe it is Dewey's information, but it's this or whatever. Do you have like a kind of different perspective, outlook on it? Do you have like a different idea of like a direction in which they should take this and how they should kind of make it make sense? Again, I'm just trying to make Sidney and Gale's team up make sense on top of, making just the overall film make sense and why Ghostface is going after Sidney and all that stuff. And then again, just based on the information that we have, which again, take all that stuff with a grain of salt. It's just rumor, but how do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.